Full screen. Please let me know if you do. Joyce, if you could give me a thumbs up if you see.
I do. I see a black screen that says migration in the middle.
Wonderful. Oh, that's so exciting. All right. So folks, we could talk about bird migration for days upon days, and I'm so hoping that you get out to some of our programs, sign up, register. Thus far, they are free. The bird walks that we're doing, and they're all over Cleveland Metro Parks. I've been doing them up at Weddy Park at Edgewater. Now is prime time. Now today's a little bit icky out there with the rain coming down, but the last couple of days we've had remarkable bird migration. And I know everybody's so excited to see all these newly arrived birds. For a lot of people, when they think of bird migration, they might not be hardcore birders or new birders or even really that familiar with birds at all. But one of the key birds that people think about during migration is, of course, Canada geese flying over. Whenever they see those geese and those big V flocks, they think, oh, wow, birds must be moving. Those geese are migrating. They're on the move. And geese are big, and they're quite symbolic because you can easily see those groups of birds in the sky. When you think about all the little songbirds that start arriving and showing up in our woodlands and our wetlands and our fields, you think, where in the world did they come from? They're so small, and did they get here in flocks or did they fly alone? It's much easier to see migration with large birds like Canada geese. But what about all the billions of small songbirds that arrive here? Now, another bird that we see in massive flocks, so visual migration that is quite astounding, that we go, whoa, birds must be moving, or they're here, are blackbirds. Starlings, red-winged blackbirds, cowbirds, and grackles will form massive moving flocks in the sky, twirling around. These flocks will roost together in wetlands, and they form these incredible, moving, almost artistic, just beautiful clouds on the sky. And again, that's another symbol of migration that a lot of people recognize because it's awe-inspiring and it's quite huge. And so, again, we're going to talk about, well, wait a minute, how did all of these birds actually get here in the first place? Because they kind of just show up. So we're going to be talking about these remarkable songbirds like this Canada Warbler. Canada Warbler is soon to arrive on our north coast of Ohio. They arrive here approximately May 8th through the 16th, and Canada warblers are a highly sought after warbler. This little songbird spends a winter in other places outside of the United States, outside of Mexico even. So they spend the winter well south of us. We'll also talk about why in the world do these birds fly so far to spend the winter somewhere else or to spend the summer somewhere else. Birds like this Blackburnian warbler, which is a must-see. Everyone rushes over if someone has pointed out, Blackburnian, Blackburnian. They rush over to say, where is it, where is it? So they can see that fiery red throat, those beautiful orange tones, contrasting against the black and white patterns. These songbirds are very small. A lot of them are similar in size to black-capped chickadee, or a nuthatch, or a titmouse. Most of them smaller than a cardinal. They weigh only as much as a couple of dimes or quarters that you would hold in your pocket or your hand. They're remarkably light. They're remarkably fast, and they're mostly made of feathers and fat. So where do these birds go and where do they come from? So I'll give you a second to kind of embrace this picture here. This is the 8 major migratory bird flyways throughout the world. And you can see a lot of people wonder, actually, well, do birds only migrate through the United States, Canada, Central America, South America, and Mexico? No, this is a worldwide phenomenon. In fact, some of the most impressive migrating birds migrate from Greenland to the tip of Africa or cross the entire globe during their migrations. So you can see there's multiple flyways that birds take during their migrations. From the Pacific Americas, Central Americas, Atlantic Americas, all the way through the Mediterranean, East Africa, Central Asia, and Australia. Flying through Malaysia, flying along the coast of China and Japan. So impressive migratory pathways all over the world. Now, this one might be a little bit blurry, unfortunately. The text is actually within an image. I'm going to take a sip of water here. I've got a little scratch in my throat. But here in North America, we have three major flyways: the Western Flyway, the Central Flyway, and the Eastern Flyway. And what's incredible is if you look at those purple, the purple lines for the Eastern Flyway, some of those flyways take these birds out over the entire Atlantic Ocean down to the tip of South America. So these tiny, tiny, tiny birds are flying thousands of miles to get to where they want to spend the winter. So that would be in fall migration, or where they want to spend the summer. That would be spring migration. Some of these round trips are absolutely incredible. And some of the longest trips can be 9,000 miles long, which is just extraordinary for these tiny little birds. Joyce, I'm taking a little sip of coffee here. Do we have any questions?
I do have one question. You may address it at some point in your presentation, but do the migrating birds show up on weather radar?
Oh, I cannot wait to talk about that. In fact, that is a huge portion of our talk. And I've got really cool maps, even some live maps to show you how they do show up on weather radar. So your questions will be answered today. We're going to keep moving through this intro part, and then absolutely we are going to get to birds showing up on radar, because that is extraordinary. I love this image from National Geographic. Hopefully it shows well on your screen. I know that you can't see the little pieces of text here and there. I believe you can actually get this as a poster. And I'm probably going to be looking to get this as a poster myself. The illustrations are stunning. And this shows multiple migratory routes from different species of birds, from the West Coast through the Great Plains to the extreme Northeast coast. And so birds take many different flyways, many different routes based on the species that they are, based on the different types of foods that they're looking for, and habitats that they need to survive in. So albatrosses will be migrating offshore in the Pacific Ocean, whereas some birds like peregrine falcons will be migrating through the Great Lakes and down along the East Coast. So every single bird species has a different route. Here's a very stark contrast so you can see a little more clearly just some of these routes. Those lines that look like veins wrapping up and around South America, Central America, Mexico, United States, and Canada all show different migratory routes of different species of birds. And they're highly complex. The image on the left is just extraordinary. The image on the right is fascinating in that it shows where nighttime lights are the brightest. And of course, you can see that across the eastern portion of the United States, our nighttime lights are quite bright, which is a whole other issue we're not going to talk about today. But just extraordinary to see these migratory routes. So why in the world do these birds migrate? Why does a tiny, tiny bird like this Swainsons Warbler, why does it migrate from Central America and Mexico all the way up to the boreal forest of Alaska? So again, this Swainsons Warbler weighs as much as a couple of pennies and dimes in your hand. It's mostly made of feathers, hollow bones, muscle, and it's about the size, a little bit larger than a chickadee. Why in the world does this bird spend the winter in South America and Mexico and then fly way up into Canada, northwestern US, and Alaska to spend the summer? I'm going to pause and see if anybody knows the answer. Why does this bird do this? Why doesn't it just fly a couple 100 miles south and set up shop? We might not know. All right, well, let's talk about that because this is a baffling thing for a lot of people. Why does this bird expend so much energy to fly thousands of miles away or hundreds of miles away? And the answer is,
Jen, wait, I have one answer maybe.
oh, okay, let's try.
We maybe need food sources that aren't available?
Yes, absolutely. So when you think about, let's say Alaska, let's use that far northern summer range. So if you look at the breeding range of this Townsend's warbler, which is that bright red and orange, they nest way up into Alaska. Now during the summer, it still gets quite chilly. However, the boreal forests, which are made of a lot of spruce trees and pine trees, those trees support them with tiny little caterpillars and mosquitoes and gnats, black flies, and other tiny little insects, as well as nectar from some of the flowers on the trees. During the winter, Alaska becomes mostly, essentially, uninhabitable for a lot of birds. It is so cold. There's so much snow cover. Those deep, cold temperatures don't allow for all the insects and the nectar to be found. Now, why doesn't this bird just fly from Alaska to, say, Colorado? Colorado sounds warmer. Well, no, it's not. During the winter, Colorado, it's heavy snowfall, blasting winds, and the number of insects cannot support all the Townsend's warblers. So they must fly all the way down into the foothills and mountains of Mexico and into the tropical forests of Central America. That flight is extraordinary. And yes, it's risky because they need to stay away from predators. They need to stay away from bright lights shining from buildings. And you never know what storms they might fly into or nearby on their travels. But the amount of energy that they do spend to fly all the way down there for the winter or fly all the way back up there for the summer is worth it. And that is what keeps that species alive. Now, how in the world do we know all of these things? Some of you, most of you maybe, have heard of bird banding. And bird banding has been around for a long time. Bird banding, this fellow is using a mist net, M-I-S-T, a mist net, which is a very, very soft net. When I first saw these nets, I was a little nervous. I said, oof. It does not look good that these birds are being captured in these nets. But the material is quite soft, and the bird banders go to these nets quite quickly to get the birds out of them. They do get tangled up, but just enough to where it holds them in place, and the bird banders very gently pull them out of the nets. Joyce, I saw a question pop up and then it disappeared. So do we have another question from?
I do. I have a couple questions.
Oh,
and again, I don't know if you will be answering these down the line.
Okay.
But one is, are all bird species protected by the Bird Act?
Okay. And what's the second one?
The second one is, if a bird species migrates, will individuals ever not migrate?
Oh, wonderful question. Okay. All right. So yes, most bird species are protected under the Migratory Bird Act. Now, the Migratory Bird Act has been under attack for some time, but I think things are getting back in line, and they're receiving again the protections that they require. The Migratory Bird Act helps to protect each species from being hunted or taken in too many numbers. So either not hunted at all or hunted in very, very, very low numbers. But most of these songbirds are not hunted at all. It helps to protect their habitats that they stop at and nest in, and overall covers anyone from ever trying to keep these birds as pets or something like that, or to collect their feathers, which in the past actually had been an issue. One of the reasons the Audubon Society was formed was to protect birds like egrets and herons from having their feathers collected, which apparently looked very lovely on hats, but almost exterminated the species altogether. So yes, the Migratory Bird Act is a wonderful thing, and it does protect these birds. In fact, to ban birds like this fellow, you need to have a lot of training and to be certified and go through a lot of different tests in order to be allowed to do this, because you're working with those protected species. Joyce, what was the other one again? It was a great question. I'm trying to think.
When species migrate
yes,
from one area to another, the
okay.
individuals.
So yes, there are some species of birds that have migratory populations, and that same species of bird has another population that just doesn't migrate at all. So let's use an amazing bird called the whooping crane, a huge, beautiful, bright white and black bird with a lot of red around the face. So whooping crane has a population that migrates from Canada down to Florida, but there's another population that stays on the Gulf Coast all year. That population has taken to nesting in expansive, huge wetlands and moving only, a dozen miles or so, or under 100 miles to find other wetlands for food during the winter. So they're a very local population. Now, why do birds do this? Why do they have some migratory populations and others stay in one place? That is because those different populations, even though they're the same type of bird, are utilizing different food sources and habitats. They're filling that gap. So the whooping cranes that nest in big marshes up in Canada are utilizing those wonderful marshes, but they must get out of there for the winter because their food disappears. So they need to fly down to Florida. But the population that's on the Gulf Coast over by Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi, they can use the Gulf Coast wetlands all through the year because their food is there. Any other? I'll pause real quick here. What's my favorite bird? Oh, I saw that one pop up real quick. My favorite bird is the long-eared owl. I am absolutely, I don't want to say in love, that's too much. I adore long-eared owls. They are striking, spectacular. They are a little bit smaller than the great horned owl, and they have even longer ear tufts, tufts of feathers that stick up out of their head, and they can be very difficult to find. They kind of have a cat-like face, which is pretty cool as well. All right, so bird banding, which is, again, a very specialized task. Some people do it as a hobby, others do this as their life work, but they are highly certified in bird banding. What they're doing is studying these birds up close. They're taking measurements of their feathers. They're identifying what birds are passing through and when. So they take down the date that they've caught the bird. They take down measurements of the bird, all of the tail feathers, and they measure the bill, and they measure the tail and the wing feathers. Sometimes they even measure the legs. And then they put this teeny tiny little band on their leg. So this is let me go back. These are black-throated blue warblers. Beautiful. The males on the right, the females on the left. This is a male common yellowthroat. You could see how small it is. It's so tiny. This bird flies from Mexico all the way up to Canada. Now, some of them do nest here. They'll stop before they get to Canada, and they'll fill the habitats, the wetlands that are around us here. But look how tiny that band is. So you can see these folks need to be very well trained so that they don't hurt these birds or stress them out too much while they're on migration. And also just while they're on their nesting grounds or just in general. They have to be very delicate with these birds. They place this band around their leg, and the band does not hurt them. The bands are specifically designed for the adult birds so that the leg doesn't grow into the band doesn't squish into their leg. It's loose enough to where it does not bother them. It weighs so little that it doesn't add extra weight to the bird, so it doesn't bother them. And it doesn't stop them from finding a mate and having young. So it doesn't bother the bird at all, which is wonderful. So they put this band on their leg, and the band has all this information, where it was caught and when, and how old the bird was. And there's these banding stations all over the United States. They do this down in Central and South America too, and over in Asia and Africa and Europe. And all of that information on the band is collected. And there's a banding network so that they know where these birds were recaptured and then let go and when. And so they can compare the migratory routes of where these birds go, which is just simply stunning. How old they are, what age their feathers are, if they're molting or if there's an injury to it. Just remarkable amounts of information. Here's a gorgeous Prothomatory Warbler. And you can see it has multiple bands. This is part of a breeding study of Prothomatory Warblers that show back up on their summer grounds. Banding for years has been the main way that we understand when birds come back, how old they are, where they're going, and if they're using the same territories over and over again. Now, banding still happens, but we're also utilizing a lot of new information. And this new information isn't banding birds by the thousands. It's selecting a handful of certain species and geotagging them. This is a blue-winged warbler with a little geotag on the back. And what that geotag does is it has information that connects to the cell phone network, and it can show us where that bird is going at all times. How cool is that? So we can track that blue-winged warbler when it's down in Mexico or down in the Gulf Coast. We can track where it stops for the night and sleeps, and then when it lifts off again on migration, and then where it goes to nest. So this remarkable amount of information. I know this is a little bit blurry, but this is the best image that I could find. This is a Swainsons Warbler. And this little jetpack, as we call it, all right, these little tags are hooked onto their feathers, and they don't hurt the bird at all. They're unbelievably light. Look how tiny they are compared to that Canadian cent. They don't hurt the bird at all, and they don't stop the bird from nesting and raising young, because we wouldn't want to do anything to these birds that would mess up their natural history, the things that they do. Joyce, I'm going to pause there just for a second, because that's been a lot of information. And I want to make sure that people understand this, because this is just so cool. Any questions? Ooh, how long do the bands last? Excellent question, Billy. Some of those silver bands, depending on how old a bird can get. So a hummingbird typically only stays alive for maybe 5 to 6 years. Some of them can stay alive longer. But the band can stay on that bird its entire life. And in fact, most of them do. 90% of bands stay on the birds their entire life. Don't fall off, don't break, because they're very tough. There's some bald eagles and owls and hawks that have had bands on them for over 20 years. So most birds will end up passing away, so dying with their band still on them because they're not breakable and they don't fall off. That's a great question. Now these geotags, these tags right here, typically do end up coming off at some point, but not for quite a while, not until after that data has been gathered. So this Swainson's thrush, excuse me, has this tag on its back, and that tag is going to tell us exactly where that bird goes. This bird in the picture is a gray-cheeked thrush, and you can see those tiny little yellow dots. Those are the locations of other gray-cheeked thrushes. But look at the dots that have the bright pink lines. Those pink lines are showing the migratory path that some of those gray-cheeked thrushes took. So it's tracking their entire flight line. They would have done this flight in one single night. So they would have flown several hundred miles, which is just extraordinary. Birds like this willet, which is quite a big bird. This is a big shorebird. They love running through the water. They love running up and down the beaches. We can even geotag these birds and put that little backpack attached to their back. Now, the backpack for a willet is a little bit larger, and you can see that it has a longer sensor. But again, this still does not bother the bird. A lot of study has gone into how to make these so that they do not affect the bird's health or their nesting and raising young. So this whimbrel has been tagged with a new sensor, and it will be on its way, and that information will be collected as to where it goes each day and how long its flights are, and eventually it will end up coming off. But the data that we can get from it is extraordinary. Now, one whimbrel that was tagged, we learned something, and when I say we, I mean just science in general. One whimbrel that was tagged did something extraordinary that no one had known that birds would possibly even consider doing. This whimbrel, and this is a small image because it's super pixelated, but it's the best that I could find. This whimbrel was migrating down through Canada and fired off the East Coast. So that's a red line. It's actually, that red line is heading south. It recorrected itself, flew west into the middle of a hurricane. So this whimbrel didn't try to go around the hurricane. It flew into the middle of the hurricane. Why in the world would it do that? Now, that is remarkable in that this whimbrel chose to utilize those circulating winds to slingshot itself out the back side of the hurricane, so that if it rode those winds inside and then utilized the tail end of those super strong winds to slingshot itself south, it could soar or glide for dozens upon dozens upon dozens of miles in those strong winds without having to use any energy at all and fire its way south over the Caribbean islands. Now that is brilliant. So it utilizes those strong winds. Joyce, I saw we had another question pop up. Let's do that one.
We did, and this goes back to the tag, the electronic tagging or banding question or part of the presentation. Is there any concern about harming a predator that eats a bird with a band or a tag?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah. No. In fact, so this is a little bit icky, but let's say that a hawk does catch this Swainson's thrush right here. A hawk is not going to swallow this bird whole. They're going to pick at the pieces and parts of it. So most hawks flip a bird over and start to start eating it from underneath where all the soft body feather, or I'm not body feathers, because they don't want to eat the feather, where all the soft meat is. And so no, they do not swallow the tag. They're able to differentiate the meats from that. So birds like an owl, which do catch birds as well, are going to do the exact same thing. There's no birds that are going to swallow these birds whole or accidentally get that tag. They're able to recognize that is not meat on the bird. That's a great
One more question about the banding.
Yeah.
Do the bands give info, like what about the migrating southwest birds that fell from the sky last year? Will the band, or will these trackers or banding give that information about the birds that fell from the sky?
Great question. Not the silver bands. All right, so not the little metal bands that go around their leg. Those little bands can't connect to us any way. We only can tell what's on those bands if they're recaught in a mist net somewhere. Now, if they are recaught in a mist net somewhere, we can say, oh, this bird was originally banded, say down in Florida, and it flew straight here. That's impressive. The way that we understand more of how these birds navigate and where they go, even down to the hour of the day, is by these incredible tags that are connected to the cell system, the cellular system. That information is giving us up to date, sometimes even to the minute, of where a bird is, where it's going, if it's encountering a storm, what habitat it's going into. So it's the tags that are connected to the cellular network that are giving us the most in-depth data possible. That's a great question. So to really see in detail how this works, make sure you look this up. It is super cool. Project Snowstorm. Who wants to guess what bird this project is about? Project Snowstorm. I'm so glad snow is over. I hope it stays away. Anybody? Joyce is looking.
I have an answer. Snowy owl.
Snowy owl. Good job, Billy. All right. Snowy owls. Project Snowstorm is about snowy owls. Now, if there was ever a project to do, this would be the one, because you do get to capture and very gently and for a short period of time handle snowy owls in order to put that little jetpack on their back. Now that is a sensor right there. Now obviously for this bird it's a little bit larger. You would never ever put that sensor on a tiny warbler or a little kinglet or gnatcatcher. But snowy owls can handle, and again this sensor weighs the weight of pennies. The ability to put that compact technology into these tags is just remarkable. This tag connects to the cellular network, and we can figure out where this snowy owl goes every single 5 minutes. That is cool. Now here on a larger scale, each color of these lines is the track that a snowy owl took. These are all different snowy owls. So you can see that each one of these snowy owls, actually, some of them are crazy. One of them with the orange line. Look at the one with the orange line. That bird was nuts. All right, it came down from the Canadian Arctic and flew over the James Bay, down through Canada, circled the Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, Lake Huron, came up through the middle of Michigan, fired off the east side of Lake Superior, crossed along the coastline of James Bay again, and went all the way back to, within a matter of 100 miles, the same area of the Arctic Circle again. Holy cannoli. That is amazing. How would we be able to know this information? Through the little metal or silver band on a snowy owl? Absolutely not. We may be able to know Okay, if this bird was caught down on Lake Ontario, we could say, wow, this came from Alaska. But we would have no idea that it made this specific, incredible circulating flight around the Great Lakes, up along James Bay, across James Bay, and back up. All right. Now, the times I saw that pop up, the time span for each one of these owls is quite different. All right. Some owls linger in certain areas for longer. Sometimes the time span of a movement like that was over the course of an entire winter. For other species of birds, like a thrush, they might be able to do that flight in a matter of weeks. So it's different for each type of bird. For snowy owls, they like to linger for quite a while. What you're seeing right here are two different snowy owls. One of them's the name is Whitefish Point, and the other snowy owl's name is Chippewa. Very sweet. So Chippewa has the red lines, and I know it's tough to see the red lines on Chippewa. And I will say this, if you look up Project Snowstorm, you can see these maps in very great detail. A lot of times what folks do is they take screenshots of these images that came off of their computers and they post it up, but on a big wide screen, it's hard to see. So on your personal computer or your cell phone, these may show up in more detail if you were to look this up. Let's look over at the green one because that looks like less of a blob of a mess of lines. So Whitefish Point, the name that they gave to this migrant snowy owl, every single blue dot is where it was at the end of the day. That's where it set up shop. All of those lines are where it went throughout the days. So you can see that this one owl went, oh, I'm going to go west over to this edge of the field. I'm going to go all the way up to across the next agricultural field. But they stayed in these individual areas. You can also see what's amazing is that they really did not intercross one another. So they took good care to stay out of each other's wintering territory. Would we be able to track this information without those tags, just using bands? No. Now, of course, we could observe if we had someone there every day watching each snowy owl, we'd be able to observe what it was doing during the day. But that's a lot of observation. These tags are showing us every single day where these birds are going, which is remarkable. Joyce, I saw a question pop up.
Yeah, someone's asking, how is Buckeye the snowy owl doing?
I have no idea. That's a great question. That is something you'll have to research. Look through Project Snowstorm, type in Buckeye the snowy owl, and see where Buckeye is yesterday or today or last week. That's a great question. That's a good one. All right, so this tiny little black-poll warbler, has one of the longest migrations of any little songbird. It flies from way down in South America all the way up to the Alaskan boreal and Canadian boreal forest. They pass through here, so we get to see them for a couple of days. Now, how in the world do they do this? I'm going to read this out loud slowly. Oh, just lost my hat. The secrets of their amazing navigational skills aren't fully understood. The reason is that birds combine many different types of senses when they navigate. Birds can get compass information from the sun, so they use the sun, the stars in the sky, and by sensing the Earth's magnetic field. They get information from the position of the setting sun, the moon, and landmarks that they see during the day. There's also evidence that sense of smell plays a role. That's known for homing pigeons. So this black-poll warbler, when it recognizes that it is time to migrate, it is time to leave South America, it's time to leave the cloud forest. They are using the length of daylight, the position of the sun and the stars in the sky at night, the Earth's magnetic field, to recognize it is time to go. It is time for me to leave South America and start my flight to the north. So they use all these different combinations of senses, we'll call them, to recognize that it is time to make the flight north. So when we look at this picture, we see that we're gonna look at the bottom of the picture. So in Venezuela, so the top of South America, those are several different black-polled warblers. We see that they're going to leave Venezuela, stop over on the East Coast briefly for maybe a night, and then they're going to fly all the way across the eastern US, the Great Plains, up across Canada, and then finally stop in Alaska or northern Canada. So they're moving across the entire continent. They might even be flying out over the East Coast as well. These teeny, tiny birds have that information in their brains as to where they are supposed to go. Some of these secrets of migration are beyond our comprehension still, but we learn more and more each year. How they have that genetic information placed in their brain to know where to go back to, what habitat to return to, what habitat do I need to go to in order to survive, where am I going to find a mate, and where do I fly to rest before I get back to my winter grounds. This information is genetically stored in their brains. The flight that they take, they follow the geography, they look at the sun, they look at the moon, they look at the stars in the sky. Most of these birds are flying at night, which is unbelievable. So they need to utilize big time the magnetic field and the stars in the sky. Migration can be triggered by changes in the day length, lower or warmer temperatures, changes in the amount of food based on those temperatures, and genetics. For years, people who have kept caged birds have noticed that the migratory birds go through restlessness each spring and fall. So every time spring comes around or fall comes around, they start to get very restless, fluttering towards one side of their cage because they're wanting to go towards the south or towards the north. Behavioral scientists gave this behavior the name zagunra, meaning migratory restlessness. So even in these caged birds, which I don't recommend having a caged bird, birds need to be out in the air flying. That's just my personal opinion, not the opinion of Cleveland Metro Parks. But even this restlessness was given a name zagunra, meaning that these birds get ready to move. Now let's rock and roll some radar because this is sweet. What you're seeing here is a radar cone. This is how we detect these birds flying over at night by the millions. So you see the half circle below, that's Earth. All right, let's say that circle right there is circling Cleveland. The cone that's angling up into the sky is radar. That's the same radar that we use to see if rain is coming over us, clouds, whatever weather is coming, snow. That cone shoots straight up into the air, and everything that passes over that cone is recognized by radar. So if snow starts to go over the radar cone, we can see it shows up on radar as a blue type of precipitation or a pink or a purple. If rain comes over, it's typically green, and strong rain is yellow and red. At night, during calm nights with no precipitation, it is very easy to see during the spring and fall, if it's good for a movement for birds, millions of migrating birds heading over top all of these different radar stations around the US. So as these birds are picking up at dusk and leaving, getting up into the sky, starting their flights, let's say north for in the spring. They're flying over these radar cones, and that radar is reflecting, oh, here, you know, the flight ceiling, these birds are coming over. It's detecting that they're coming over. Warblers and flycatchers, all these migrant songbirds, tanagers, orioles, they do not fly in a flock together like geese, but they do get up into the air at the same time. Kind of like if you knew a bunch of other people were going to Yellowstone, but you all took different cars. That's what these birds are doing. All right, we're going to the same place, but we're all going solo. See you there. These are birds detected by radar. Each, we call them blue donut. Each blue donut has upwards of 350,000 birds migrating over top that cone at once. So when we look at this is a Great Plains, so we've got North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska, down through Illinois, all the way down to the Texas coast, tip of Texas, where it meets Mexico. We can see massive blue donuts, these huge circular, and they're circular because the radar cone is circular. The densest, darkest blue is even more birds than the lighter blue. We can recognize where storms are because they're shaped differently. So if you look at the East Coast up towards New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, parts of Virginia, North Carolina, you'll see that it's sort of disorganized. It's like this stringy blue and patchy green. It doesn't have that unique cone shape. Those are storms. That's rain and other precipitation. This is what it looks like when you're watching radar live. I'll give you a second to soak this into your brain. This is stunning. So you can see this, the date is October 16th. So these birds are actually headed south. You can see a storm moving across the East Coast and going down into Florida. And you can see because it's not a blue donut. So watch for that storm. It's going across the southeast coast, and then it's sort of collecting in Florida. And look at the size of those birds detected. Now this is going quite quickly. This is going very speedy, the time. So this is hour by hour passing very quickly, showing over an entire night the birds migrating. And when those clouds disappear, when the blue donuts disappear, that's because they're descending down to the ground and they're not showing up on the radar. So each night during migration, you can watch this radar. You can stay up all night if you want to, watching the movement of birds passing over. And you can learn to detect the different precipitation. So real quick on the right-hand side of the screen, so the typical view of birds shows those donuts. The ones that have the green centers have upwards of 400,000 birds passing over them at any one time. And precipitation is usually real stringy and patchy and blobby. You get used to quickly looking for that. You can even go in very closely and look at one area and see where those birds are going. These birds are leaving the Cuban coast and arriving in Key West, and others are starting to head up to the northwestern coast of Florida. These are all birds with the densest core in the middle of the cone. I'm taking a sip of my coffee real quick. Just remarkable. You can watch this each night. It's absolutely fascinating. So this group of birds is upwards of 300,000 different birds in the air at the same time. Remember, they're not in a big flock. They're all lifting up into the air at the exact same time. And this is over the course of 2 hours. These birds are flying over part of the coast, arriving in Key West, Marathon, and others are going to continue on. This is showing all of those birds migrating during those couple of hours. Joyce, do we have any questions at the moment?
We do. We have a couple questions. One
Fire away.
is, are the little blue dots groups of birds, not just the big donuts, but the little blue dots? Are those also groups of birds?
So let's clarify. In this image, this entire blob is made up of anywhere from 300 to 350,000 birds. And all of those dots you see are birds. The reason why it's darkest at the core is because that's a center of the radar. That's picking up even more birds flying over through the middle of the radar. So yes, all of these birds, or I'm sorry, all of this action here, besides the storms, those are all birds. Now, sometimes during the day, you can pick up the movement of grasshoppers and dragonflies. So if there happens to be kind of a scary large amount of grasshoppers that are being pests out in the Great Plains, you can actually pick up those grasshoppers in flight during the day. Yes, Joyce, go for it.
Okay, one other one, which I think is a great question. We have more air traffic right now by Burke due to the NFL draft. Is this affecting the current bird migration?
Great question. So airplanes do not affect birds. Birds affect airplanes. So I'll say that again. Airplanes don't really affect birds. Now, unfortunately, yes, every single year, every single airport across the entire world, birds are killed by planes. But that's nowhere near, not even remotely a smidgen close to the number of birds that are killed by cats in people's backyards. It's not even close to the number of birds that are killed every single year. A billion birds are killed by cats in people's backyards. Airplanes are actually more drastically affected by birds utilizing some of the grassland areas or the little wetland areas near airports. At each airport across the globe, there are scientists that work at each airport that scour the grounds and work to keep birds away from the airports in an effort to eliminate as many strikes as possible. So with the number of planes flying into Burke right now because of the draft, the biologist that works at Burke is going into overtime, making sure that the great blue herons aren't landing near Burke or the gulls aren't swarming there. They use loud sounding firecrackers and gunshots to try to keep birds away so that there's no strikes. They don't want birds getting hurt and they don't want people getting hurt. Great question. Joyce, was there another one?
Yeah, there's a couple more popping in. What is this website called? What is this website for people to go and check the radar?
Right, yeah. So this is, I'm going to pop out of this. So I'm still sharing my screen. Okay. Give me a second here. Oh, I thought I had it popped up. This will take me a second. Hold on. Bird migration radar. Oh, you're seeing me hack into the mainframe here. Hang on there with me. Okay. Let's let this load. So this is right now. So the website, I'm going to copy and paste it into the chat. Copy. Give me a second here. Huh. Joyce, I actually don't know if I can. Oh, let me stop sharing my screen for a second. Or no, there's the chat. Let me click on, there it is. There it is. Hold on. I can pop up the chat right here. I'm pasting it into the chat. But bam. So save that. You should be able to click on that and then save that as a bookmark. And every time you open that up on your phone or your computer, you can see the current radar. That is the current radar. Here is another site. I'm going to do it right now. Okay, we're going to talk about this next. This image is going to pop up on our screen, so I'll just put it in here now. Paste. Birdcast. This is Cornell's site. And what you see here is bird migration forecast maps based on the weather. So you're going to see the night of April 29th, for example, 240 million birds are predicted to be moving. So these are stagnant. These are flat maps. You can click on the next couple of days and see, okay, on the night of May 1st, there's high migration. So we're going to talk about this in the presentation. You can also do live bird migration maps. This is so cool. I'll play one. Give it a second here. So these are two different websites. The first radar that I showed you that I'll go back to in a second. This is having a hard time loading. That first oh, here we go. And I'll press play. Okay, this was the night of April 28th, showing 35, that's now 70, 100, 220,000 million birds migrating. The red line that goes across the screen is sunset. And so you can see, and then the yellow line that cuts across the screen is sunrise. So you see birds lift up into the air, but then also descend. So let me click out of this. Both the birdcast, the flat migration map that you can study, it gives 3 nights total in a row, and then it gives the next 3 nights. This is an active, they update this every 6 hours, but this shows you what is predicted to be moving. Is migration going to be heavy or low over us? So the night of April 30th, we're not going to have many birds coming in. But you can then also watch each night live, play the live migration maps, and that shows it exploding at sunset and then descending at sunrise. And the little arrows show which direction they're heading. So I use this website because you can see these two things. But then my favorite is that one, the tempest.aos.wisconsin, WISC edu. This is the remarkable active migration. So what you're seeing here is massive front coming through much of the eastern and United States and the Great Plains, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Texas, and through Missouri and Arkansas, all the way up to, it's actually reaching all the way out to the East Coast offshore Massachusetts. So this is live. You can't zoom in, but you can go slower or faster to slow it down to see. These two websites are far and away. I suggest you keep those tucked away as bookmarks. I'm going to go back into the slide here. We only have 3 more slides. Go back into present. Boom, we're back in. When you look at local radars, so for each state, you go to each state's national weather forecast, so that you type in a state. And typically, for each state, they'll show different maps over certain areas. That's how you would find something even more localized, like this image right here. So this is from the National Weather Service, a radar image over this specific area. And state by state, people can go in and find little zoomed in patches to see locally what's happening. So this is back to that the birdcast. This is a forecast map for the night of September 18th, 2020. I actually remember birding the next day, September 19th. This was insane. The number of birds that were pouring down through the Great Lakes, the East Coast. If you look at the Texas is like white with yellow and orange and purple, but that is high migration. That is millions of birds pouring down through Texas on their way south. So this is September. This would be fall migration. They're heading south. We gather all of this information and we learn about each bird species. I'm going to let you watch us for a second to try to wrap around this. This is going every week. So this is weekly. So it's jumping weekly. Boom, 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 boom. And we're now going through July, August, and into September, October, November, and now December. So this is throughout the entire year. This is showing a bird species moving up through the United States, migrating north, nesting during the summer, and then now going back down into southern United States, essentially disappearing because it's spending the winter in Mexico or South America. Now we're back in April and it's exploding back up through the United States. This is one species of bird, one, migrating up into the United States, coming back down through the United States to spend the winter. All of this information has been gathered through, bing, we're going to pull out of here for a second. Hold on, sorry, it's flashing at you. eBird. I'm going to pull this up so you can see it. eBird.org. I'm actually logged into mine so you can see my eBird. I'll go to my eBird. I've set up an account. So here's my little jump run field. 785 species of birds. I've done 5,362 checklists. Photographs a bunch of birds. This shows just what I've seen in Cuyahoga County, my latest checklist, where I've been, and then some photos. You can make an eBird account. I'm here on me. eBird.org. I'm sending that in the chat. Or you don't even have to make an account. You can just explore it. I just clicked on the Explorer. This is exploring eBird. Yes, there's a lot of things. It's very exciting. Takes you a second to get used to it. But once you get used to it, this is one of the easiest formats I've ever seen. We can explore a certain species of bird. We could say, all right, I'm going to look at snowy owl. So it gives me some information about snowy owl, but then, and these are all recent photos of snowy owl sounds, top videos of snowy owls. All right, so let's watch this one. Why not? Can you see that okay, Joyce?
Yep.
Snowy owl feeding a lemming. Hold on here. So all this information can be gathered off of eBird, one of the single greatest scientific sources. It is the single greatest scientific source of all time for everything birds, because you can access the birdcast is actually through eBird. Those are the same people that do that. So snowy owl here, I'm skipping along the video. Oh, here we go. Male just brought in another lemming. Oh, it's just chugging that lemming down. Look at this snowy owl family. You can watch this stuff all day. I'm just fast forwarding a little bit because I thought we had a little. Oh, there it is. There's a young bird. Center of the screen, just left of the female's head. There, she's ripping up that prey and shoving it down the throat of that young bird. Anyway, all of this is eBird, the greatest single everything. Here you can see maps, large maps of where these birds have shown up. So hold on a second, it's loading. You can see all around the globe where these birds have showed up. Then you could click and zoom in to see the most recent sightings of snowy owl. So I'm zooming in. All the purples are sightings of snowy owl all over the years. Okay, got to zoom in some more. to show all the little markers. There's markers where every single snowy owl has been seen. Oh, here's a recent one because it's bright red. All right, so every single blue mote, there's another snowy owl up here. There it is. On April 2nd, somebody had a snowy owl at 10001 East Center Road, Essexville, and they even photo. All of this data is gathered in all of the in eBird's collection to give you access to birds real time, to be able to learn how to read that radar yourself so you can say, oh, birds are migrating heavy tonight. I need to get out the next day because they're going to arrive. I'm going to be able to see those. Now, over the next couple of days, migration is going to be really low. But then, night of May 1st, predicted 388 million birds. And look at this beautiful orange and white and yellow up through this. So tons of birds are going to arrive on May 2nd. So this is night of May 1st. They're flying towards us. They're coming. So then you want to get out on May 2nd. Get out there. All right, let me return back to my video for our last, or my presentation. There it is. So again, all of this information can be accessed. Present. There we go. Final picture here as we wrap up. Average peak migration dates. The reason I did this today is because we are in the jackpot of first bird arrival. All of these millions of migrating warblers, flycatchers, vireos, thrushes, thrashers, orioles, tanagers, they are coming through. The past couple of days have been amazing. Now, not every night is going to be great for migration. If it's cold and raining, it's going to shut down the flight. But our peak migration is going to happen from now until May 15th through the 16th, 17th, 18th, through that window. So you've got the month of May to get out there and see all these newly arrived birds. We could just talk about just even more about migration. Some of the best places to see birds around us. The Rocky River Valley historically has been incredible, right around the nature center, because you have the edge of the river right there. The Rocky River, birds work along the tall oak trees and sycamore trees along the river, down into the wetlands. You want to get yourself around the edges of wetlands and around the edges of forests where birds will congregate. They love being in the sun first thing in the morning, and they like to warm up, and that's where the bugs warm up too. Hands down, one of the greatest spots to see birds during migration. Now, it's different every day, so you can't show up thinking, oh, this is going to be the greatest day on earth. It could be. But if it's colder or rainy or the winds have been the wrong direction, you want the southwest winds. That may not be jamming with birds, but the next day could be. Wendy Park, Lakefront Reservation, Wendy Park, Cleveland. I'm going to start typing these. So, Rocky River Reservation near the Nature Center. Okay. Wendy Park, Cleveland, Lakefront, Nature Preserve. Huntington Reservation, remarkable. Gosh, really anywhere you go is amazing. The entire Cuyahoga Valley National Park, Brecksville Reservation, Station Road, Trailhead. That's Brecksville Reservation and CVNP, Cuyahoga Valley National Park. You want to mostly get up to the lakefront. Now, a lot of folks love to go out to Northwest Ohio. McGee Marsh is different this year because the boardwalk is being registration is being taken for the boardwalk, and a lot of spaces have been filled. But there's a ton of places to go. Ottawa National Park, National Wildlife Refuge, Sheldon Marsh out in Erie County, incredible number of places. All right, I could keep going. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna stop. Ask any questions before we wrap up our morning's talk. Any questions? Oh yes, Tawas Point, Michigan. Thank you, Christina. Tawas Point is incredible. Point Pelee National Park in Ontario. I know it's hard to get to Ontario right now. They're on lockdown.
Hey, JB, we had one question that we didn't get a chance to address. And at this point in the presentation, since we're running a little late, maybe just a quick yes or no, but do bats migrate?
Yes, bats migrate. Eastern red bats, hoary bats, silver hair bats, they migrate. They can migrate hundreds of thousands of miles. So do some species of dragonflies. That's a whole other talk. Do bald eagles eat little songbirds? No. Bald eagles love fish, big fish like carp and steelhead. And sometimes they'll take geese and ducks, but they don't eat little songbirds. Too tiny for them. Too fast. Well, folks, I'm going to wrap up. My email address, I'm typing it in here right now. JLB1@clevelandmetroparks.com. You can blast me with questions. I will get back to you. We've got a lot going on, taking care of the animals at the nature center and getting the gardens in order. So I will get to your questions as soon as I can. I want to thank you so much for attending. I can't wait to see your faces and get out and look at birds with you. Well, thank you, Christina. You said I watched these. This is probably the best yet. Well, that's because it was about birds. That's why. And the park should do a WebEx on backyard predators. Okay. Yeah, that's a great one. Thank you, everyone, so much. Joyce, thank you so much for hosting. That is unbelievably kind. Making sure all.
My pleasure, JB. I learned a lot too.
Yay! Folks, feel free to contact me anytime. Hopefully, I'll see you out on one of our walks. Just go to clevelandmetroparks.com, look at the calendar, register. It's easy. And we'll see you out in the field. I'm going to wrap up. You're welcome, Billy. Bye, everybody. Thank you so very much. We'll see you again soon.